Why this rule represents a cultural shift in Arizona: real estate from cash is king to cash triggers scrutiny. For decades, one phrase has echoed through listing presentations, offer negotiations, and investor strategy meetings: cash is king. In Arizona's fast-moving real estate markets, cash has traditionally meant power. It meant faster closings, fewer contingencies, no lender delays, and a stronger negotiating position. In competitive multiple offer situations across Scottsdale, Phoenix, Mesa, Chandler, and Paradise Valley, cash often won. However, beginning March 1, 2026, cash, when paired with entity ownership, may carry a new implication: federal reporting scrutiny. This does not mean cash purchases are illegal. It does not mean LLC ownership is prohibited. It does mean that transparency is no longer optional in certain non-financed, entity-based residential transactions. Arizona's unique exposure to the rule. Arizona is one of the most investor-active states in the country. The market includes high institutional investor activity, strong short-term rental corridors, out-of-state buyers forming Arizona LLCs, frequent 1031 exchange reinvestments, private money lending, and seller carryback financing structures. Many of these transactions share common characteristics: entity buyers, non-bank financing, quick closings, and layered ownership structures. These are precisely the types of transactions that FinCEN has identified as presenting higher transparency risk. Although earlier geographic targeting orders did not include Arizona markets, the permanent nationwide rule does. Arizona is now fully within the regulatory framework. The state is no longer outside the federal spotlight. The risk of complacency. Some agents may be tempted to assume that reporting is solely a title issue, or that federal regulations fall outside the scope of their responsibility. Phrases such as, "title handles that," "that's federal, not my problem," or "if it closes," reflect a mindset that no longer aligns with the regulatory environment. Under ARS, paragraph 322153A1, the Arizona Department of Real Estate may discipline a licensee for dishonest dealings. Under AAC, R4281101A, a licensee must exercise reasonable skill and care. Under AAC, R4281103, designated brokers must provide reasonable supervision of their agents. If an agent knowingly assists in structuring a transaction to avoid reporting, for example, suggesting ownership workarounds to conceal a beneficial owner, that conduct could create federal exposure, state disciplinary risk, and potential civil liability. Even in the absence of criminal intent, ignoring obvious red flags may raise supervision concerns. The standard is not perfection. The standard is reasonableness and professional conduct. What this means for Arizona brokerages: this rule requires operational awareness. Brokerages should begin updating policy manuals, incorporating investor-client education into buyer consultations, scheduling agent training meetings, and coordinating communication procedures with title and settlement partners. Broker owners should ask practical questions. Do agents understand which transactions may trigger reporting? Are investor clients being educated ahead of time? Are transaction coordinators prepared for additional documentation conversations? Are agents trained to respond professionally if a client resists beneficial ownership disclosure? For Arizona brokerages with high volumes of LLC purchases, this is not merely a legal technicality. It is a business operations issue. Client conversations will change. Investor clients may begin asking new questions. They may say, "Why does the government need this information?" They may argue, "I already filed under the Corporate Transparency Act." They may ask, "Can we structure this differently to avoid reporting?" Agents must respond carefully and professionally. Licensees cannot provide legal advice. They cannot recommend ways to avoid federal reporting requirements. They cannot promise confidentiality beyond what the law permits. The appropriate response is neutral and factual. This is a federal transparency requirement effective March 1, 2026. The settlement agent will guide the reporting process. Clear, professional, compliant. part of a larger federal trend. The 2026 Real Estate Reporting Rule does not exist in isolation. It follows the Corporate Transparency Act under 31 U.S.C. Paragraph 5336, expanded anti-money laundering enforcement initiatives, increased sanctions enforcement, and greater financial data integration among federal agencies. The federal government is steadily moving toward greater ownership transparency across industries. Real estate is simply the next sector integrated into that framework. Arizona agents who understand this shift early will reduce transaction friction, set accurate expectations with investor clients, avoid last-minute compliance surprises, and strengthen brokerage credibility. Agents who ignore it may find themselves reacting under pressure rather than leading with preparation. Chapter 1. Summary Section 1.1 explained why residential real estate became a federal transparency focus. Section 1.2 examined FinCEN's authority under the Bank Secrecy Act. Section 1.3 defined the effective date and scope of covered transactions. Section 1.4 clarified why this rule represents a cultural and operational shift for Arizona professionals. You now understand the why, the who, the when, and the impact. Chapter 2 will move into transaction mechanics. You will learn what qualifies as a covered legal entity, which specific transaction types trigger reporting, and where gray areas may exist. The foundation is complete. Now we move into application,